This is the Praktica Fx2, a 35mm SLR from East Germany made in the late 1950s. It's a fully mechanical camera with a waist level finder, and it has that classic old school look. A solid metal body, square edges, and a simple design that feels pretty timeless. I actually didn't go out of my way to get this particular camera, I just fancied something new, and when I was flicking through some cameras, this one really stood out to me. It's got kind of a unique look, something a little bit different. You don't see these too often, and it's also fully mechanical, and mechanical cameras just really appeal to me. All the different clicks and sounds and just the process of taking a photo is kind of a little bit different, especially with this one, so yeah. It's definitely got a few unique sort of features as well, which is kind of fun. I loaded the camera up with some Colour Plus 200 for a change, and took it with me when me and Christina went on a little road trip to Donegal on the west coast of Ireland. So this was me lining up my first shot on the new camera, which was actually before we went on this trip. I took this photo twice with two different apertures, but when my scans came back, neither of these photos were there, so obviously these first two were totally exposed to light during the loading process, which was a little annoying, but what can you do? I also got a new to me, even though it's quite old, camcorder. It's a Panasonic GS280. Been using this thing a bit recently, just taking it on trips and stuff, just so fun to record with. It makes you want to record footage. So there's a few clips from that in this video as well, and maybe in future videos too, because like I said, it's fun to use. Looks surprisingly nice too, and the audio is actually quite decent for a built-in mic. Give her a bit of stop. It's a really big thing, isn't it? Creepy. We arrived in Donegal quite late, so the next morning we got up for a sunrise, which turned out to be nothing really, but conditions were really moody, so after a quick bit of breakfast we drove around a few spots and took some photos on the Praktica Fx2.
This is you realising how you have to take a portrait photo.
Yeah. To the side, not looking at the scene, invert it. I mean, it can be done. It certainly helps that the shutters here. Stuff's not hard enough to take them. You'll have to be somewhat swift. So this first shot has a little film burn, again probably from the loading process. It's also not really in focus, but it was raining and I was trying to be quite quick. I think I maybe shot this at f4 or maybe even a little bit lower to keep my shutter speed a little higher. I found myself having to shoot a lot of these at around 1/100th of a second just to try and avoid motion blur while shooting at a higher aperture to try and get the best results I could from this lens. Not a great photo, but I did expose it reasonably well, so that's something, I suppose. I did also take a few of these photos on my X-T3 with the 23mm just because I thought this scene looked quite cool, and obviously I didn't know if the Praktica even worked at this point. Welcome to a very blustery, rainy, cloudy and very dramatic west coast of Ireland. If it's going to be bad weather, this is kind of what you want. You want it to be dramatic and cloudy, kind of moody looking. Trying out the Praktica Fx2 for the first time. First few shots here. I took one on the way up here, which hopefully turned out. I have no idea if this camera works at all. It literally looks pretty much brand new. It's kind of crazy. I don't know who owned it. I got it off eBay. No, I actually didn't get it off eBay. I actually got it off a vintage camera site. I'll put it on the screen at the minute. I seen it on Instagram. They shared some photos of it. I can't remember the exact name, but seeing this thing, I was in the market for a new camera of some sort. Never heard of this camera, just seen it and thought that's kind of quirky. It's a bit different, and as you probably have already seen, it has the top-down viewfinder, which is just cool. It's nice to use. Like I said, I've took a few photos. I'm trying it out. Hopefully these shots come out. Just trying to play around with apertures and see what works best. It's got a few quirky little features, as I'm sure I'll show throughout this video. But I took a shot of this scene. This is a 50mm lens, by the way. Kind of cool, really dramatic. And then I took another one of just the flowers along the side of the road. So this is the first photo where we can really start to see if the camera is actually working properly and how things are looking. And there are definitely a few things that aren't too great that I noticed with these shots. First of all, I do actually try and make notes, especially when I'm using a new camera. So I got Christina to record a quick clip just for reference. Don't mind the wind noise, it's just for me to look back on. This photo, show them the scene, show me the scene so I can remember. Photo. This photo was shot at f4. You see this?
It's got my in here.
Infinity at f4 for this scene. Everything's pretty far away from me. And I shot at f5.6 at 1/100th with the timer on. Is there any motion blur and is everything in focus? So that just allows me to compare those settings to other settings, and then I can check things like motion blur and sharpness at different shutter speeds and apertures. Firstly, the exposure of this shot seems pretty spot on. Obviously I had to manually meter with the app on my phone, and it seems like this shutter speed is working nicely because the exposure looks good to me. As you heard me say, I shot this at f5.6, which I was expecting to be the sharpest aperture on the lens, or pretty close to it. I think it probably will be, but it's hard to tell with just this photo because, as I mentioned, firstly, I shot this at 1/100th of a second, which when shooting handheld, to me, and from my experience at least, is verging on being too slow. I know lots of people say that's fine, but I also noticed it with my Yashica 2, anything under 1/125th is risky. So it's hard to tell, but I think there might be a bit of motion blur in this one. My focus was set with the little infinity mark at f4, and I did shoot it at f5.6, but again it's hard to tell with just this photo if those settings are ideal to shoot a scene like this. The obvious issue with this shot, and it's on some of the others too, is the dark shadow on the right side of the frame. I'm not sure what that is or what caused it. I would guess it's shutter related, but I might be wrong. If anyone knows, it would be great to hear some thoughts on this because it's a recurrent issue on other photos on this roll, as you'll see. There is also like this sort of reddy magenta sort of bar on the left hand side of the frame. It runs along the edge of the image. Again, not sure what may have caused that. Could that be film related? I'm not sure. But if you have any ideas, again, it would be nice to hear them. Again, on this one, exposure is pretty spot on, which is good. I think I shot this one at f4 or maybe a little lower. I didn't make note of every shot, even though I probably should have. The focus is really shallow in this one though, and I do think I nailed focus where I was trying to on this one because you can see where the focus falls off. It certainly could be sharper, but it's not terrible. Again, it was shot handheld. Now, it doesn't look like there's motion blur to me, but there could be a slight bit, which is why it might be a bit soft. Again, we have the same issues with the shadow on the right and that magenta sort of bar on the left-hand side of the frame. But something that is a lot more obvious in this one, and is also a recurrent problem with almost every image on this roll, is these harsh lines going horizontally across the frame. It's more noticeable in the sky, especially when you drag the exposure down a little bit. This is a bit of a strange one, but I did do a little bit of digging into it, sort of. Now, I did look at the negatives themselves, and there is some lines going horizontally along the film, but they don't look like serious film damage, and what's strange is I did scan a few of these photos myself to see if I also noticed it, and strangely enough, I can't see those lines at all in my own scans. If anyone has any ideas on what that might be, I'd love to hear them, so drop a comment below or jump in the Discord and let me know, because yeah, kind of a strange one. But it's definitely a fun camera to use. I'm just trying to get used to what aperture and stuff works best, what's the sharpest, and obviously I'll not know till things are developed, but ideally what I want to do is get that in my head so I know I'm pretty much always going to shoot at, let's say, f5.6, which is probably likely, and the focusing's a little bit fiddly. There is a little magnifying glass in here, but ideally what I want to be able to do is come up to scenes like this, just flick the viewfinder up, expose whatever way I need to expose, and not really have to worry too much about critical focus, because the fun of this camera is the top-down viewfinder, lining things up and snapping away quite quickly, I think. So after this first roll, if it works, I'll kind of know the gist of things a little bit more, but fun. I've got Color Plus 200 in, by the way. So this photo and the last one of the same road both turned out really nice exposure wise. I am having to adjust these photos way more than I usually would with my film photos with like Portrait 400 or Kodak Gold. This roll with Color Plus 200 had quite a strong magenta tint to it, so I'm having to adjust that for each photo. Now, I haven't shot Color Plus 200, so I'm not sure if that is a normal thing or not. I'm also not sure how much of a difference in sharpness there might be between Color Plus 200 and say Kodak Gold in 35mm. Everything else is much the same as the other images though, same issues with the shadows and the lines, again you can see quite clearly in these two images. The sharpness, to be honest, is not as good as I would have hoped. Shooting these at f5.6 and focusing about a third of the way into the frame, I would expect things to be a bit sharper, but another thing to mention is that there is a timer on this camera which you can set with the little shutter speed dial here. When you turn this little arrow to point to the other red arrow, it activates the timer. But it is extremely short, and I felt like when pressing it on the tripod there was a little shake and the timer was like a second or two at most, so any motion in the tripod wouldn't even get a chance to totally stop before it would activate the shutter. I could be wrong, but I think that definitely was a likely cause of sharpness issues on some of these. I didn't have my shutter release cable, but next time I'll definitely use it and see if it makes any difference. I do really love this scene though, and I took the same photo again on my X-T3 with the 23mm. after a very windy, tiny little road to this like little harbour, and we're just up off the harbour a little bit. Just took a few shots in the XT3 there, and now I'm going to try the shot on the Praktica. This is a cool little scene. There's boats behind this building here, but I think the frame's probably better without them in it, but I'll maybe try both. I think I'm going to go f5.6 again, and it's kind of 1/25ish all day because of the clouds. Hopefully my meter's a bit hit or miss, but it says 1/25ish. So this is another scene I do really like, and I quite like how this photo turned out actually. Pretty much all the same things with this one as there was with the rest. Shadows on the sides, lines across the frame, and I do still think it should be a bit sharper, but again I shot this at pretty much the same settings as the rest of the photos, so I don't have any comparisons. For now I will blame the shutter speed and the film, and when I change those things hopefully they'll improve on the next roll. It is a great scene though. I would love to photograph this in different conditions too. So this was a last photo in the roll type shot, not my normal sort of shot, but to be fair, I have been wanting to get a really nice film photo of a pint of Guinness. I will keep trying, but this one is decent and I'm actually really glad I took it, because this one gives me some hope that the images can be much better than I've showed you already, particularly when it comes to sharpness. This was shot at f4 at a 25th of a second with the timer, but this time I sort of held my hand on the camera to keep it still, because I had the camera tilted up on Christina's phone to try and get an angle to take the photo, and I focused on the little beads of water on the side of the glass, and this looks much sharper than all the other photos. Now obviously it is a lot closer, but it still looks really good. Yeah, like I said, I'm really glad I took that last photo, because it does give me a bit of hope that there is better photos to be had with this thing, and I definitely think there is, with a few tweaks like potentially a faster film and my shutter release cable. I do think I'm going to be able to improve the photos. Fingers crossed, I'm hoping. The top-down viewfinder on this thing is just so nice to look through, and it's kind of one of the main reasons why I hope I can get better photos, because I want to continue using this thing. It's kind of unique, and just, yeah, I like how it's built, I like using it, so if I can get good photos I will definitely use it more often. It's also built like an absolute tank. For a 35mm camera, that is heavy, as you can hear. Solid piece of kit. I shot the rest of the roll, the other half, in a different video. I actually got up for a sunrise a few weeks ago at this point and got absolutely delightful conditions. Obviously run into the same issues that I had because it's the same roll, but I still got some photos that I quite like, and on the next roll I will then make those changes with shutter speeds, my shutter release cable, stuff like that, and see if I can improve the images. So I'll try and do that relatively soon to compare things. But anyway, hopefully you enjoyed this one. Hopefully you enjoyed seeing this camera in use, something a little bit different. If you have one of these cameras, or if you've tried one, drop a comment below, let me know how you got on and if you got some nice photos with it. But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this one. If you did, maybe give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing, and as we always say, take it easy, don't be a stranger. What I probably should have said was, if you have one of these, jump into the Discord, because I'd love to see some photos you've took with it. You can maybe give me some tips and potential issues that I might run into, more than I already have. Yeah, links below to the Discord.